Hello and welcome. Today's focus is on coaching and formative feedback. And there's kind of four things that we're going to answer today. So our goals for the end of the session are to be able to answer these four questions. What are formative classroom walkthroughs? Be able to differentiate between the focus on teaching versus the focus on learning, and how formative classroom walkthroughs will improve this process. Know how formative classroom walkthroughs improve student learning, and I'm going to share some of my strategies of how I would lead staff through this observation process. So what are formative assessment walkthroughs? That word formative is so important when we think about formative assessment for students. It's done not as an evaluation at the very end to judge somebody, but really to improve student learning and to guide next steps in the process. Um, and that's really going to be the same thing for teachers. So a formative assessment walkthrough means administrators, and I'd love to actually see it be a whole team of people who get to participate, and every staff member gets to both observe and be observed as part of this process, but that these walkthroughs are formative. So an administrator and team come in, do an observation, it's focused on what the students are saying, doing, and less about the teacher moves. That's sort of secondary to the focus on the students. And again, it is formative. The purpose is learning. The purpose is improving your practice, and that culture is so important in formative walkthroughs. It is to inform instruction, inform next steps, and to sort of guide teachers in making some improvements. We always want to be learning and growing. Informative assessment walkthroughs are a big part of that process. So what are we looking for? There are 7 things that an administrator would look for according to Muss and Brookhart. So first, you need a worthwhile lesson. So that means, is it based on a standard that's a grade level standard? Does it have important context in students' lives? Is it relevant? Is it culturally responsive? Then we're looking for a shared learning target. Do students know what they're supposed to be learning? 3, a performance of understanding. This is, again, that focus on students. Are students talking to each other? What are they writing? What are students being asked to do? Number 4, student look-fors. Students need to know what the success criteria is. They need to have the rubric that they're being evaluated on and sort of know what success looks like for this particular learning target. We would want to see formative feedback from teachers, students self-assessing or sort of like knowing where they are, um, and being able to accurately like describe their own learning in connection with that rubric. And finally, the effective questioning to advance thinking. We would want to see teachers using a variety of questioning strategies to move student thinking forward. So that sort of helps answer question 1, like what are these and what are we going to be looking for? Question 2, so how does this focus on learning improve the walkthrough process? Typically classroom observations have been something where like they're often sprung on you, the principal comes in, they're watching you the entire time, they're focusing on the teacher. This does not necessarily guarantee effective instruction. Um, there was some like mystery behind exactly what they were looking for, and it did feel very evaluative. The purpose was not to help you grow and be a better teacher. The purpose was to judge your teaching. Um, and this is different because the focus is on learning. My favorite part about these walkthroughs is that they're for learning for the students, the teacher, and the administrators. Like everyone is going to learn and grow together in this process. Um, Something I've seen before is just sort of the idea that the administrator walks in, looks around the room, goes, oh, good, everyone's sitting in their desk quietly. The teacher's really got things under control, check, move on. That doesn't necessarily mean that the kids are paying attention or learning, or that they know what they're supposed to be learning. They might be totally lost and confused and zoned out. So you really do have to focus on the students, not the teacher. Um, and again, our goal is to create expert learners who have the skills that they need for college and career. And to do this, we need to pay attention to what and how students are learning, so teachers can adjust their practice to better support their students. And again, to create those expert learners, we need students to have agency. We need them to know what they're supposed to learn. That increases motivation. We need them to know the path to get there. We need them to know where they are on the path. That's that self-assessment. So we really do need, in order for students to have that agency, and be able to take control of their own learning, this process really helps um, focus in on that. And again, it's not about evaluation, but it's about learning and growth. The purpose needs to be for everyone to improve their practice, not for like a gotcha moment. So the purpose is learning and growth. It's formative. Number 3, how can these walkthroughs, I have that question. No, good. Improve student learning. So there's so much going on in the classroom at one time. This is something as a classroom teacher that often like having somebody come in and be able to take some data and observe what students are doing and saying, I can't be everywhere at once. Um, this is one thing I loved about having a student teacher was the ability to sort of play this role in my own room, to listen in on student conversations, notice what students were saying and doing, but to just have that extra person in there to help free up like that information for the teacher so that they can make changes going forward, because you can't act on information if you don't have it. So this really also helps us answer questions 2 and 3 from our PLC of how will we know if students have learned, and then what will we do if they have not learned. These formative observations can help teachers know if students are learning, make sure students have, again, what they need to be drivers of their own educational process. And if students are not understanding these things, right, then it's time to take some steps to rectify that situation. So teachers will be in an environment where they feel free to try new things, right? So if you notice that something's not going well based on these observations, try something out and see if that helps improve student learning, and then work forward collaboratively. So this is something that it's not just a teacher doing in isolation. I'll talk more about coaching cycles in a minute, but this is everyone working together to move towards proficiency on those standards. So how would I lead staff through implementation of formative assessment walkthroughs? So I always think it's important to explain the philosophy and the goal. And as a leader, part of my job is to build that culture of learning. And again, like I know in my district in the past, like data has really been used as a weapon against teachers. It's been, we need data. Data is our friend, but it can't be just used to call people out and shame them. It needs to be like, well, look at this data, now what, right? That's the piece we were always missing. It wasn't formative. It was being used as sort of a summative assessment of the teacher's quality. So we need to use that data in a formative way to make changes and then check back, reflect. Is it working? Is it not working? And try something new. Um, I would also like to include everyone in this walkthrough process. So I would start with people volunteering to be observed and provide subs so that all teachers can do observations. That helps sort of remove that veil or that curtain behind the process so people can see, you know what, this really isn't about gotcha or about shaming people. This is really about learning and growing together. And when you get to be an observer in somebody else's room, that's a really positive experience. It builds peer connections. It lets you learn from your peers. And then it takes away some of the stigma or the fear behind the process. So I would like to start again with the volunteers and then provide each other with feedback on what they observed. Again, and it's not about criticizing, it's about learning. Um, I would, as a leader, be part of that observation team. Again, that transparency. Say, what are we looking for? That's sharing those 7 things that we're going to be looking for. So it's clear, it's not a mystery. And again, maintaining the focus on students first before we look at what the teacher is doing. Some of these things are teacher led, like did you share the learning targets with students? But again, the primary focus is on what the students are doing, which is the same as our coaching cycles. In our coaching cycles, it is student-centered coaching, not teacher-centered coaching, because our focus is always on the learning. Then I would ask for feedback on the process from teachers, and I want to show myself as a learner too. I would write thank you cards after every observation because it's always sort of a personal thing to have people, in your space and observing you teach. So I think just showing thank you for opening yourself up to this process and saying something kind to each teacher after an observation is important. And part of our formative feedback and coaching work, we're also going to utilize our instructional and behavior coaches and student-centered coaching cycles. So these cycles will begin with looking at student work, behavior assessments, planning for future units, including new instructional strategies and structures, and using formative assessment and reflection. This is a great opportunity for professional growth. So our whole building is really going to be that growth mindset, that learning mentality. And again, just focusing on the formative. We want to use these observations as a way to gather some data, then make some changes, reflect